Hey, and welcome to another installment of Oddit, or Auditoration, which is the official podcast of the Fractal Journal. You can find the Fractal Journal by typing https://fractaljournal.com into your search bar. So, the Fractal Journal and Auditoration just cover a wide variety of topics. I kind of find things that are of interest to me and that I feel like would be of interest to the general public and look at them through a multifaceted lens. One of these things is water, and I'm writing a book about water called Perpetuum Mobile, or Perpetual Motion, Eternal Motion, something to that effect, because I think that's the characteristic of water that's most important to pay attention to, the fact that water moves, and almost no action that we take, whether it be industrial, agricultural, domestic and personal, etc., is isolated. It's all going to end up affecting the whole system of water. Even when water evaporates, pollution gets carried off far and away. I think it's either PCBs or some such chemical that was found in Eskimos and in tribes in the Amazon, which are thousands and thousands of miles removed from where those legacy pollutants came from. Now let's talk about what a legacy pollutant is real quick. A legacy pollutant is basically something that's left over from the early days of industry, when we didn't know that much about the properties of these things that are affecting the environment and on our health. And a lot of these are still out there and are still being cleaned up. How I found out about all of this stuff is that I read a book by Prud'homme called The Ripple Effect, and in it he talks about Newtown Creek, which is up in New York, and how around the time that this book was written in 2010, there was still an ongoing effort to clean up tons upon tons of chemicals and PCBs and the like under the city. There were lots of reports of weird bone cancers and things in the area for years and years and years, and whatever company it was that was involved in it, I'm not exactly certain, basically kind of skirted the issue, which from certain business standpoints makes sense. We do have to hold them accountable, but look, those were actions that were taken by the company years ago, and why should they be held responsible for it now? But on the other hand, something has to be done about it, and this company is the one that did it, and they do have the funds to at least help remediate the problem. So there's lots of issues around water that you might not be aware of, like there was a huge amount of pollutants in that Hudson River, Newtown Creek area. But today, I'm not really going to talk about that because, as you can already see, it's kind of removed from my memory. That's the thing with this, is that there is so much information. And I feel like we all need to really get to grips with this information. I don't know why there's been this media blackout. Perhaps the story is not sensational or interesting enough, or it's too detail-oriented, but I have heard very scarce mention of the water issue until something like Flint happens or there's some poisoning. And I feel like it's something that requires continual coverage. It should be something that's part of the body of common knowledge. We all have things that are considered common knowledge that we have to know: how to tie our shoes, how to drive a car, how does the tax system work, sort of to the best of our abilities to understand what are our responsibilities, etc. Well, one of these things should be hydrology, how water works, how it is that it interacts with us through a social, economic, agricultural, and industrial sense, because it's mobile, and it gets everywhere, and into everything, and it's absolutely essential for our survival and our thriving. It's an access resource. And let's look at the Chesapeake Bay, which is what's talked in Chapter 7 of Prud'homme's book. And the Chesapeake Bay is a 10,000-mile-long area that basically spans the entirety of the northeastern and parts of the southeastern United States, kind of like Virginia, West Virginia. I guess you could call that part of the southeast, I would. And, right, that area, the Chesapeake Bay, is kind of a shallow, very biologically originally rich area that is fed by the Potomac and Susquehanna rivers. And what I would like to say about this area is that it's no longer as biologically rich due to pollution from what? Not only agriculture, but farming. You see, the Muddy Creek, which is a tributary of the Susquehanna, is full of nitrates and phosphorus, which are basically the byproduct of manure and waste that gets into the water and causes something called eutrophication, which is the growth of algae. And the growth of algae, when it gets crazy like that, it blocks out sunlight, causing there to be less oxygen in the water and species to die. So as you see, there's this creek, the Muddy Creek, and it's out somewhere rural, somewhere idyllic looking, somewhere beautiful. But it flows into the Susquehanna, which then flows into the bay, and so you have a vast fishery affected by stuff that's thousands of miles, or hundreds of miles rather, inland. And that's why we have to start paying attention, because we all like to eat, and out there in the Chesapeake Bay, it's famous for the blue crab. And so when Alex Prud'homme went out there, with a team of hydrologists and such to look at things and to talk about them. At the end of that tour, they were eating in a restaurant, and the crabs that they were being served, the crab cakes, I don't know if it was just done for dramatic effect, but it's what was in the book, came from Indonesia. Now here's the other kicker, we have to take care of our water systems because our agriculture and our fisheries depend on them. And do you want to really get your crabs from Indonesia when some of the best crabs would have come from the Chesapeake Bay originally, when the area was so thick with oysters originally that a captain somewhere in the 1600s said that they were as thick and were made it hazardous to navigate the bay because they were as thick as boulders. So here's the thing. Look, if you're getting your food from Indonesia, that means you have to pay for transport, for shipping, for all these costs, and that's another big environmental thing. Also, the jobs are now in Indonesia rather than here in the States with the crab fisheries and stuff that if we had preserved a little bit more carefully that area by paying attention, being knowledgeable about water so that we can participate in our democratic republic and hold those in office to a higher standard, well, you see what I'm getting at here? It's very, very important to be informed. That's what I'm doing, trying to do myself, and I'm trying to propagate this information, not only because I have an interest in, selling a book, but because I try to make supporting myself and the work that I do about something that has a positive effect on the world. I'm not one of these people that thinks I can change the world, but I can at least in part contribute to it. So please join me on this journey. If you like what you're seeing, subscribe to the channel, add a like below because that helps the channel grow. Check out my website. If you feel so inclined, contribute to my Patreon. I'll be uploading stuff regardless of whether I make money or not, but obviously the quality of what I do will go up with the more resources that I have available. I'll be able to cover travel expenses and equipment expenses much more easily that way because, well, that stuff is quite expensive. But anyway, let's get away from all that boring pitching stuff and just say thank you and have a great time wherever time finds you. Goodbye.